One once a teller at a time like this. African-American poet Gwendolyn Brooks, in the middle of the last century, wanted what we want now and what people have always wanted for so many centuries. One wants a teller at a time like this, because it's always a time like this, a time of darkness and of beauty, a time of gentleness and of violence, a time of confusion and strife and hope and love, and we want a teller. I'm going to skip ahead to the spoiler to reveal the message of Brooks' teller and maybe what we all want to be told. The last lines of her poem make the point with clarity. Behold, love's true and triumphs, and God's actual. The Pharisees, Levites, and all the other good believers of their time wanted a teller. They lived in a time like this, a time of wilderness and conflict, a time of desperation and of anticipation too. And the teller they came upon was a man named John. John was very clear that he was a teller and only a teller. 10 times he tells us what he's not. He knew he was not the light, not Elijah, not the Messiah, not even the one to untie his sandal. But he knew what he was there for. He could tell them something true, that the one they were looking for was already there in their midst, unbeknownst to them perhaps. Among you stands one whom you do not know. This sounds at first blush quite different from Gwendolyn's tale, yet stay with me, because I think they're telling us the same thing. If we can hear John inviting the curious crowd into humility, you don't know. Just as he is humbling himself, I'm not worthy either. Once he establishes that he is not the one, and that they come with no real sense of what's happening, then he shares the news. He is telling them, and perhaps us, that God is already in their midst. God is actual. One wants a teller at a time like this. And the other lines of the poem, it's worth a Google, maybe after church. Please. We hear that cry for companionship to help bear our burdens. We acknowledge that we can all feel a little lost and adrift from time to time, certain only of uncertainty. John and his listeners, both the ones with all the questions and the ones lining up to be baptized, they felt all these same feelings, a sense of loneliness, facing griefs and precarity, because it's always a time like this. And humans are a wandering, wondering lot. So they came to ask John, and he said, I only know how little we know, but I can tell you this, God's out here with us, whether we know it or not. And in fact, all the truth tellers tell us the same thing over and over again throughout the centuries. Love triumphs. God is actual. God is among us, whether we know it or not. This is the telling of Advent time. Advent, as you may have noticed, is one of those vestigial practices of the church. It's a forgotten season to most, useful for marketers only to sell 25 various sample-sized gifts in little bitty boxes. Advent, as a lead up to Christmas, can come across like a grumpy set of prophets and firm ideas about when we should properly have parties and decorate trees. The scene set by the Advent readings is not the manger scene, nor a sky full of angels. Advent has been described as a cleared and empty stage with only a simple curtain and a man walking out from the slender opening to say, "I'm here to tell you something." What he's here to say is, God's actual. God is among you, whether you know it or not. Meanwhile, in mid-December out in the world, it can be hard to hear what anyone's saying. Rooms are crowded and loud. Stages are not empty. My house is more full of beautiful Christmas clutter. Our calendars are more crowded with school concerts and exams. One wants a teller in a time like this, but it can be hard for the teller to get through to us. What with our errands and all the doom scrolling. Plus, there's the onslaught of messages about what else to do, what else to buy, and how cheery to feel about it all. So it's a flipped script for these tellers in a way. They come along and say, "I'm not going to tell you that much. Not much about myself or even God, really, but I am going to tell you this, that God is already in your midst. Always has been. Always will be. Whether you know it or not. It's true regardless of your to-do list, regardless of what you think about Isaiah or river water baptisms. It doesn't matter if you feel Christmassy or Adventq or anything at all. It's a time like this, you see, a time of war and twinkly lights. And it's a time for a teller. Advent is a brief time, briefer this year as it edges up on Christmas Eve, so we could almost get away with skipping over the whole thing. But if we did that, we'd miss the telling. And deep down, we want so much to be told something true and good, don't we? If we can start with enough humility to say, "I'm not even sure what I'm looking for, but I'm out here looking for something." If we can carve out a little time to listen to the tellers, we'd be glad, even when sometimes they come across as a little strident or kind of cryptic. If we skip Advent time, we'd miss the tellers who remind us that God's presence may not look like anything we're expecting or waiting for. In fact, we may not even have to wait at all. God is among you. Behold, love's true and triumphs, and God's actual. So you can go to the river or to church or stay home, and God is still among us. You can show up with all the answers or all the questions. We might know or think we know what God's presence is like, and sometimes we'll be right. You or I might flounder around and walk right past the Messiah. Yet God is there in our midst. For all the times like this and then some, there are tellers ready to remind us about the light. For Gwendolyn and for the priests and for folks who aren't even looking at all, God is actual. There was a teller sent from God whose name was John, whose name was Gwendolyn, whose name has been forgotten, whose name is known only to us. They came as tellers to tell about the light, about the love, about the times like this, so that all might believe that love is true and triumphs and God's actual, so that all might believe that among us we'll find God already and always.
Please stand as you're able for the creed. We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty,